What's going on, guys? This is Pete Clarke. I am going to come at you today with 2 tables of Zoom live. I was hoping Smudge would be here for the intro of the video, but he seems to be, I don't know, a bit preoccupied right now. So we're going to be playing 2 tables, Smudge and I, and we will be sitting in, sitting out, looking at some stuff on GTO Wizard to see how we played, and effectively doing a sort of study as we go, kind of line check session where we hold ourselves very accountable for all of our plays, good and bad. So without any further ado, let's get the cards in the air. I think with 2 weaker players on the table, well, 1 weaker player in the big blind here, this is definitely an open that we want to make. I'm going to min. I would normally go a bit bigger, but when this happens, I think it's imperative to just save a little bit of money, since obviously we have to fold much of our range here. These little things do add up. So this is an interesting spot. We play this hand against a rather loose-looking player. I have this sort of hand here that's a little bit too frail for me to want to check against a recreational. The problem is, I wouldn't have an issue checking this against a regular. I'd be checking pretty often on this flop, out of position. The problem is that his range is wider, and he's also probably not going to understand that I shouldn't be betting all the time there, and therefore he can continue a hell of a lot to a bet. So I think it's normal for recreationals to perhaps overfold that spot, but even if he's not overfolding, what's going to be happening there is he's going to be usually stabbing just too much and too erratically when checked to, like without enough polarization or order in his range. And for that reason, we're going to want to just bet our not completely hopeless, but fairly hopeless hands, because they're just going to gain EV that way. Both of these hands are fairly standard. We're going to call Jack 8 here and open 7s. We flop a set. My range is going to bet about 40% of the time here. My hand is going to bet, I guess, a bit more. Let's go for 55% of the time with our hand. Going to check this time. We roll a 74, which is a higher number for me. On the scale of 1 to 100, Jack 8 is just going to be a fold. So we'll have a look at any of the interesting hands as and when they come up. I think this is, again, a hand that you can slow play. Blocking the 7, you're blocking a hand that would check back. This is what we call a polarizing blocker. It makes it a bit more likely the villain has a Jack or a 9 or air, but not a 7. Therefore, I am going to play blocks and overbets here, but I'm going to mix this one between and checks. I'm going to mix this hand between lots of different actions. I'm going to check this time. Checking out a position here, completely fine. You do want to protect this checking range. I think against a bet, we're going to have a pure raise. Hand is extremely nutted. I mean, I wouldn't play a massive raising range here, but I think we do want one. I think 7s is one of the hands that's going to go basically pure in this spot. I'm going to go large, fairly large, but not massive. I could go a bit bigger than this, actually. Probably should go a bit bigger than this. Jack 8, 7, I'm going to play a big bet strategy, and I think against the blue tag, I'm just going to pure bet the King 9 of clubs. We're expecting villain to probably be overfolding this node. Fairly bad river demoting our hand. I don't really expect this spot to get bluffed very often if I check here. I think betting is therefore going to be better. I think big bet and block are both okay. I'm going to choose block, just based on the amount of range filtering that's already happened here. We also have blockers to some 2-pair combos that call a bigger bet. So I'm going to build a blocking range on that river and use that hand for the job. On the turn here, we could bet again. We could check. I'm going to just check. We're kind of running out of time because I'm explaining my thoughts at the same time and kind of getting 2 situations at once. We will look at these in just a second. I think hand can bet again. I think it can also check. It's a bit of a mix. I think when a weaker player calls a big c-bet on this flop, turn being so static here is very likely to be underfolded. I don't see that many hands that will want to fold on this card in a recreational's range. This may not be a recreational. Sometimes I mistag people because their HUD looks a certain way over a small sample. But anyway, as I said, we're gonna sit out here and take a look at a few of these hands. So in case you're wondering, on the right table there, we were called by King Jack, so villain had turned top pair and river 2-pair. So fairly standard hand from all sides there, I think. But we'll have a look and make sure that my line is okay. A couple of spots to play here, perhaps just before we pull up the GTO Wizard for those hands. I'd rather this flop is over here, but yeah, ace 8-4. I'm not going to bet anything near my range here. I think ace deuce is just going to be really low frequency bet for me. I don't mind betting this sometimes. I really don't care. I don't mind checking. I like building a checking range with 2 lower to middling cards on a 2-tone ace high flop. I think this is right. Turn, we're demoted to what would normally be a bluff catcher, as this is a recreational player, will sometimes be ahead of merges as well. We'll be chopping with some ace-3, ace-5 hands by river. We'll be in good shape against things like King-Jack that are leading for no reason, pair plus draw. Another benefit to checking flop is we gain the transparency, so when this happens we have a very easy fold, and we can kind of loiter and see what's going on. Okay, this player just folds, which is fine. But yeah, the check back on the flop, one of the bonuses, the kind of hidden benefits to that line, is that sometimes it will just go bet raise or something like that, or bet big and call, and we'll be able to just fold all of those spots with a hand that's devoid of redraw and just struggling to survive there at the best of times, let alone when there's multi-way aggression on the turn. So yeah, transparency is a cool concept. I talked about that, I think, back in one of my earlier key concepts videos. Okay, let's do some GTO Wizard. The first hand I want to pull up here is this one. So just to recap this hand before we look at it. So in the spot, we went ahead, converted now from big blinds to chips, just in case it's a bit confusing. Went ahead and opened here, we get call. 974, I estimated that my betting frequency here would be something like, I think I said 40% with range and with hand a bit more. We'll see if the solver agrees with that or not in a minute. I don't think frequency is that important here, just as long as you're mixing bet with check is totally fine. I would just be playing a small bet here every time out of position in the small blind. The jack turn, I think having some overbet is totally okay here. I don't think the opponent's going to have a lot of nutted combos. Like usually here, this sort of turn can nuttify your opponent's range, if that's a word. But I think after the passive check behind in position, where this player has quite a lot of urgency to pot build with the top of his range, we can safely assert that his range is much more capped on a gradable scale than it normally would be. This means that we can use overbets, we can use blocks here. I would have both. My most standard default game plan for the turn is to play a block bet and an overbet, and also check. I think here we can certainly overbet here, we can certainly big bet here, so we can certainly check here. I think we can also block here because we are blocking pocket 7 specifically, which is a hand that doesn't raise, and we're unblocking something like a jack, which does raise. We do also unblock a 9, which probably just calls a block, and so this hand might actually just mix between overbet and check. We do check this time on a roll of an 85, villain bets, we go for a raise here. I think we can raise bigger here actually. When I think about the hands I'm raising, I think they're going to be pretty pulled for the most part, like 2 pair plus sort of region, so I think we can go bigger. And then on the king of clubs, it's definitely sensible that we have some bluffs in our range here. Our hand is probably no better than a block after the amount of filtering that's happened, and this card obviously just smashing everything, so kind of thin block here. I don't think we can go bigger than this. I don't think we should check this hand with blockers to 9-7, jack-7. These are hands that call but don't bet, and unblocking hands like ace-jack, king-jack, queen-jack that call here. So I think probably just block is going to be a fairly pure action, but we'll see how wrong I am just now. So here we have the hand. We're going to go to replay this hand. So replaying this hand in GTO Wizard, then we're supposed to... Oh, it's playing a limping strategy here. That's interesting. We are not playing a limping strategy, but that's okay. This might change the ranges slightly compared to what I'm used to. This is the disadvantage of using browser-based pre-solved libraries, guys. You're not able to actually input the strategy that you play. Humans, we tend to simplify our strategies a lot. We don't just want to try and copy what a solver like this is doing. It's not really the best protocol to have, so I think it's kind of important here to run your own sims as well, and be prepared to use different software and stuff like that. So anyway, we do decide to raise. The flop comes in 9-7-4, kind of similar to what we thought. A bunch of different sizes being used here, not a disadvantage to this sort of software. Not saying this isn't good software, because it's incredibly handy and it gives you a feel for where you're making EV mistakes or not. But yeah, obviously splitting your range between 5 different bet sizes here is completely absurd. Like, no one is going to do this. Trying to do this is a complete procedural blunder in my opinion, and obviously we are just using the bet 2 here, or check. So basically all of this other bet is going into the bet 2. Some of the check is probably going into it as well. This tends to be what happens when you recalibrate towards one smaller size, and then the bet frequency will end up being a little bit higher than this, probably in the 60s instead of 40s. So I'm being a bit too passive here with my frequencies, but not really a big deal. This hand does check around the global frequency. Because it's a middle pair blocker, it polarizes our opponent's range to some extent by blocking this hand, although admittedly a pair of 7s is quite a good hand to have here in this wide range composition. Again, check, overbet, both fine. The block bet here it doesn't like with my hand, as I was kind of guessing this hand is probably just mixing the larger sizes in check. This is the one I would use, this B150 here. I did roll a check this time, so this seems completely fine. We check, and villain goes for a bet. It thinks that our hand is a pure raise, as we suspected it would be. There's not going to be any slow playing here. In fact, calling does lose like about a big blind here, which is not great. You don't want to be throwing away a big blind left, right, and centre. That's going to add up very quickly, so go for the raise. This sizing is similar to what, well, this is the sizing I made it, right? So kind of similar to what the solver was recommending. Villain calls, and as we can see on the river, we can block bet. We can also, so yeah, there's a couple of different sizes of block bet going on here. It's alternating between a size similar to the one I chose, which is this 1325. I went a bit larger than this, and then bet absolutely tiny. I don't incorporate this size here into my strategy, so you won't see me use this, but this one is fine. This hand is a pure bet. We're not allowed to check here. We just have the kind of blockers that unblock the calling range and effectively don't do a good job of bluff catching in this spot. There isn't going to be a large incentive to bluff catch this spot. This is a spot where villain's range, while it will contain some bluffs, you'll have to turn stuff into a bluff. Many of those may even contain a 7 now, because the way ranges have been reordered here is such that 7x gets really demoted after all of this action, after all of this filtering in my opponent's range, and then it becomes the case that he probably has to start bluffing with some 7x combos on this node. For example, if he was to get to this node with something like 10-7, he would have a very easy bet call, I guess on the turn at some frequency, although his turn sizing kind of precludes these hands in the first place. So maybe after this turn sizing is not such a thing actually, but in principle that point could stand. But in general, when you're playing with a fairly polarized range, you want to be value betting most of your combos. Even when they become thinner like this, you still want to be value betting. And then, yeah, check calling this hand, it doesn't really make much sense as a check call. It's not going to be blocking his value bets particularly well or anything like that. So I think just checking here is going to be a small mistake, but clearly it can't be a large mistake to check here. In fact, if I think this spot's very underbluffed, it's probably not a disaster to check fold to a large bet here, exploitatively, and the idea there would be actually voluntarily going down a branch of the tree where you anticipate that your opponent is going to make more mistakes. If I think he's going to play okay against a block bet, but against a check he's going to be too underbluffy, then I might want to invite the branch on the tree where he makes the most mistakes and then exploit that by just pure folding. The other hand that we just played was this one here with King 9, where we went ahead and opened under the gun. We picked up a call, and we decided to use a big bet strategy in this spot. In game, I actually thought that this was blind versus blind. I misread where the button was, and I thought that I had called in the big blind and then got into this spot. I would probably use a small c-bet strategy in this situation under the gun against big blind. I think big blind's range is incredibly equalizing here at the top, and this is not a board I would actually deploy a big bet strategy on had I not misread the action. So if you saw that happen, you probably noticed it at the time. Please don't comment and be like, actually the action was this. I've just said that this is the action, right? So we're under the gun against big blind. Sometimes people do that. They're like, oh, in this hand, this is the action. It's like, yeah, but the instructor admitted to misreading that in the video. Anyway, it's kind of funny. So King 9, I think we need to go ahead and bet on this turn like at a fairly high frequency. Like we're going to be doing a good amount of betting here. That said, I can't really see this hand being a pure bet or anything like that. I think it's just going to be probably mixing, but let's have a look at this one in GTO Wizard and see what it thinks. Okay, so here we are with this hand. It's a pure open under the gun, as we can see. We go for the min raise just a little bit. It's not going to change the sim very much. Villain calls in the big blind, and we get a flop of Jack 8-7. So let's have a look at how it's playing this spot. So, as I thought, it's kind of generating a lot more small bet here than it is big bet. Half pot seems to be pretty common. This is a nice compromise sizing where villain has kind of caught up at the top of ranges, but not fully. Like he's going to be 3-betting some 10-9 suited, some jacks, some 8s maybe, but probably not. And then we're going to have all 10-9 suited, jacks, 8s, 7s, and overpairs are still okay. So half pot's kind of like saying, I want to get this pot growing substantially, but not like enormously. It's a kind of nice compromise sizing. We start to lose EV when we go all in, unsurprisingly. So we don't want to do that, but anything else here is completely fine. So we go for a big bet here, which is okay, and villain calls. Turn, we have a 72% check, and we are big betting quite a lot of the time. I completely agree with the not playing. I agree with the solver. It's like I'm approving its line. It's like solver thinks this, I will allow its line to be accepted. It's good when you like see yourself as better than a solver. I really don't. But yeah, I see a note here that it's using this sizing, and I think the reason for this is just that this is a semi uncapping turn again, because we big bet flop. It's very common for villain to just slow play strong hands on the flop, given that pot growth is already substantial and our range is fairly polarized as well. So he's not going to have to raise everything on the flop here. That's why it's saying this. I like looking at a solver sometimes without looking at the actual grid, just trying to understand why it thinks certain plays are okay and other ones aren't. That's really important. I think it sort of, you end up going too deep into the range versus range thing for the needs of this session when you start like pulling up the solver and exploring everything to the death. I used to do that because I was just like too curious. You could say curiosity killed the carrot, but you know, I've got out of that kind of phase now where I get like drawn down these rabbit holes, and I'm kind of okay just using this view as I start rambling uncontrollably. Let's move on. So on the river, villain goes for a bet. We obviously have a fold. I would be, against a check here, I'd be kind of reluctant to do much bluffing against a weaker player. I think bet, check, bet, generally speaking, is going to be an over-defended line on a board like this, where there's just so many obvious hands that people actually check on the big blind here on the river instead of block betting. So I'd be a bit hesitant to bluff here if I was in a spot like this against a recreational player. I think we had this guy tagged as recreational.